coming up.
Do you stand by those claims?
It happened.
Would you like to repeat them on air now?
It happened. You have to have you got to have brain cells. You are just a sad case of a human being, and I'm so sorry for you.
We got to circle back to Arizona Senate candidate Kari Lake. In an interview with the news agent, which I'm pretty sure is from the UK, she was so wildly triggered, you absolutely have to see this. One of the things that I've noticed, and I think many of you have as well, is Democrats are much more willing to be in hostile interviews without absolutely losing their mind. And actually, mainstream liberal outlets are more in the habit of challenging people that you would call closer to their side, if you want to put it on that sort of spectrum, whereas Fox News interviews with Republican politicians will be much more of a softball interviews. You'll see softballs across the media landscape, but definitely that trend is noticeable, and that creates a situation where MAGA politicians get so upset when they're confronted. Marjorie Taylor Greene's a good example of this. She cannot be asked the slightest of a critical question without freaking out. And Kari Lake here is very similar. And this is something that definitely happens with news outlets from other countries, because in other countries, often they're just in the habit of being as hostile as you need to be to get the best thing for the audience. And take a look at this from Kari Lake. Again, this is from the News Agents USA. Credit to them. But like I said, lifting the curtain on the biggest stories in the UK and US and beyond. I'm assuming that this is from the UK, but here we go.
Mr. Trump's talked about the need for a new tone in politics, a civility in politics, a kind of unity. What does that mean to you?
I actually think the tone has always been good. I believe that what we're trying to push is a strong economy, secure borders. These are policies everybody wants. And
you don't think the tone in American politics got out of hand?
I think the tone is really disturbing when the media is calling a man like Donald Trump Hitler. They're comparing him to Hitler.
Like J.D. Vance did, you mean?
Like the media is doing. But J.D. Vance was probably, like many Americans, they listen to the media. And for 8 years, the media has been tearing President Trump apart. A good man who everybody loved before he ran. Imagine having a smear campaign going on about you for 8 years.
Yeah.
Pretty soon, everyone wouldn't like you.
Yeah, that would be terrible if it were happening, but it's not.
The fact that people like J.D. Vance and others, we've seen them, Amber Rose, she did a speech. People are coming over going, whoa, the media was lying and I believed it. And it's so irresponsible.
And you falsely claimed that Trump won in 2020. You called for the imprisonment of those who accepted Trump's defeat, including your own opponent in Arizona, Katie Hobbs. Why did you do that?
Called for the imprisonment of what?
Of opponents like Katie Hobbs who accepted Trump's defeat. Why did you falsely claim that Trump won in 2020?
I do love the question, because it's a difficult one to answer if you're an election denier, but it's totally fair, which is the election wasn't stolen. So I'm not asking you why you believe that. I'm saying, why do you claim that even though it's not true? Brilliant stuff there. But Kari Lake does not handle it well whatsoever.
Well, I'm not going to sit here and go through all of the evidence of what happened. Do you believe Joe Biden won 81 million votes? Do you think he's more popular? A guy who can't string two sentences together. You believe he's more popular than Barack Obama? I'm asking you, do you believe that he is the most popular president in the history? You have to you got to have brain cells.
Okay, so you don't believe that Joe Biden won the election in 2020?
I believe the election was run fraudulently.
And you refused to concede in 2022 as well, your own contest.
Well,
you filed
obviously you're sitting
lawsuits.
across the pond and you don't understand what's happened. And I'm not going to argue about it with somebody.
You were sued for defamation.
Yeah, because this is how corrupt the system is.
Right, and I was going to pause it anyway, but it's having some trouble loading. I'll refresh before playing you more from this. But imagine that. Having to resort to, well, you don't understand. You're from across the pond. You don't get. I'm not going to explain to you the truth. Even though, of course, people from on this side of the pond, a majority of people also don't buy the nonsense being espoused here about the election. And I really do appreciate that this interviewer, knowing, and I do want to give you her name, Emily at least is her first name according to her profile here, she knows that this will cause a spiral because people who don't have evidence after years are going to be really upset to be called out on that, obviously. But she still insists on making this really the topic she's going to focus on in such an interview, when a lot of people are going to be upset with her. Why did you use it to go back on, going back to 2020, 2022? Let's focus on what's ahead. But to understand the character and the politics of these MAGA Republicans, you do have to start with what is such a fundamental part of their value system, which is not respecting our democratic process enough to put that process above their ambition to win, right? And someone like Kari Lake, she knows, because she's been trying to find the evidence for her lawsuits and she keeps losing, she knows that the evidence isn't there because our elections are free, fair, legitimate, and secure. And so that's why she's so upset, because I can tell you, if someone confronted me, how do you know the election was legitimate? First of all, we would have a burden of proof conversation, but then I want to go, oh, awesome. Let's start talking about every investigation, every audit, every recount, every court case, the Trump campaign commissioned investigation, and how all of this yielded the same conclusion: legitimate 2020 election, legitimate 2022 election, etc. And for her, she goes, I don't have the time, okay, to explain all the evidence. There's so much evidence that I can't think of one single piece of it. Here's more.
Saying what's happened, and I'm not going to argue
You
about
were
it with somebody.
sued for defamation.
Yeah, because this is how corrupt the system is. I pointed out how they worked our elections.
You lied about a top Arizona election official. You defamed him. You falsely accused him of injecting 30,000 illegal votes into machines, intentionally misprinting ballots.
Yep.
Do you
It
stand
happened.
by those
Yes,
claims?
it happened.
Would you like to repeat them on air now?
It happened.
You
No,
think
you know what?
that he intentionally misprinted ballots?
If you
he
would-
sued you for this.
Yes, I know. I'm in the middle of it right now. It's lawfare.
And he
guess
said
what?
that
Guess
you
what?
had turned his life upside down. He said you'd made him the
Listen,
target of threats of
Emily,
violence and
Emily,
death.
I'm in the middle of a lawsuit, and I'm not going to talk about it because I don't want to work. When you're in the middle of a lawsuit, you don't want to talk about it, okay? We talk about it in court. That's where we talk about it.
That was brutal. I don't want to talk about it because I don't want to talk about it. That's why. Okay. But if I could talk about it, I'd prove you so wrong. All right.
I feel confident that I've spoken the truth. But you know what?
You
I'm not-
made him the target of violence and death. You saw what happened on the stage on Saturday night. You heard Donald Trump say, let's lower the temperature. Do you accept the part you played in inflaming the political
I've never,
rhetoric
no.
in this country?
You are just part of the fake news and you're lying. You don't know a damn thing about Arizona. You don't know one thing about our election. And you sit there with a smirk on your face. You're sitting over in England, in the UK, in a country that's being destroyed. In a country that's being destroyed.
I guess I'm just asking
And I really don't-
what it says
you know
about the
what, this is the
Republican
last
Party.
question.
That they
This
need
is
to
the- this
lie,
is the
to
last
intimidate, to threaten, because you don't believe you can win at the ballot box. Why would you need to do that?
Before going further, I've explained to you all before, playing just a big, long one clip gets risky sometimes with copyright stuff, at least in my experience. So I do want to jump in here before playing the last part. But as you can tell, think about Biden's interview with George Stephanopoulos, okay? For all of Biden's flaws, he sat there for quite some time just being rhetorically pummeled, right? Just one question after another that are the most politically disadvantageous questions you can possibly be asked, which is George Stephanopoulos reading off horrible poll numbers, reading off people who are calling for him to drop out, saying, are you fit to serve? Saying the debate performance was so off, right? All the most brutal questions. Biden would pause, let George Stephanopoulos ask the question, wasn't getting upset that was the only thing that was asked about, in part because maybe he understood why it was of so much interest to people at that moment. But if Biden were a MAGA Republican, We've seen Trump when he gets confronted in interviews. He implodes and lashes out and storms out sometimes. And if it's a female interviewer, he'll say, "You're so nasty, so nasty." And Democratic politicians so often are more willing to subject themselves to that type of criticism. I think in the interviews we've been watching, Trump is known for this. Marjorie Taylor Greene, Kari Lake. Seeing these sorts of interactions, to me, actually somehow connects to that dedication to democracy. Because Trump has been saying the government should come down hard on MSNBC for their bad coverage of him, essentially. Now, MAGA folks are supportive of that. Yeah, go after media outlets. Again, Trump's quote, not mine. That's his fault for saying that, MAGA folks, if you're mad at me for pointing it out. And that's what you're supporting. And so that plays into why it becomes so hostile. Why can't you just go, well, let me explain to you why I believe the elections were illegitimate? Because you can't. And they're offended by the prospect that they would be asked critical questions. Yesterday, we covered Marjorie Taylor Greene being asked about how J.D. Vance's statements about the UK that were sort of derogatory will impact a potential second term's diplomacy with the UK. And Marjorie just lost it. Started talking about how the reporters to blame for the attack on Trump and just crazy stuff. How is that a provocative question? What? And it's because if you respect democracy and the freedom of the press, then you really welcome those sorts of critical, hostile questions. And no, this reporter's not fake news, not being dishonest. She's just reading facts, Kari Lake, and facts trigger Kari Lake.
You are just a sad case of a human being, and I'm so sorry for you. I'm sorry that you bought into the propaganda. I hope that you'll look in the mirror and see that you've been following propaganda and you don't understand what's happening.
So I'm guessing if you don't win in November, you won't concede. That's the rule that you're playing by now, is it?
I actually think you need your head examined.
Can you answer that?
I think you need your head examined.
Kari Lake, thank you very much.
Just fantastic job from that interviewer. And Kari Lake resorts to, "You need your head examined." What do you mean? What? She said, "You're not going to concede if you lose, right?" Oh, how dare you? I am Kari Lake. Do you know who you're speaking to? Excuse me? I should have won an election. That's how significant I am, okay? So you can just speak to me with the respect I deserve, ma'am. What? How is it disrespectful to say you didn't concede your last election, and in the calmest, most respectful tone imaginable, the interviewer goes, "So is it easy to presume?" Is it easy? It is easy. Is it fair to presume that you won't be conceding in this upcoming election if you lose? But Kari Lake's response is, "You need your head examined." You've bought into the fake news. You think every objective metric by which we could judge the legitimacy of elections are the metrics we should use to judge the legitimacy of elections? Find a brain cell. Okay, because you don't got one right now. That's stunning. That is really, really something else. So let me know what you thought of that in the comments. If you want to get an extra episode of the show daily, you can do so. Support the work we're doing by clicking that join button below the bonus show. If you're not a part of the members only community, you're missing out. I'm just going to say it, all right? You should, if you're not feeling FOMO about not being on the bonus show, you should, because it gets pretty fun. And you should be there by clicking the join button below.